The DeMarvion Overshown injury is a true nightmare, but there's at least a little silver lining. We'll talk about that and some takeaways from the game. Here we go. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays with quick-hitting videos such as this one. Cowboys lost to the Bengals 27-20, and it was a rough one. There are so many reasons why it was a rough one, and we'll get into some takeaways, and we'll get into the DeMarvion Overshown injury details in a little bit here. But I just want to say the biggest reason why I think it was such a brutal loss for the Cowboys, and you could see it in the players and the coaches' reactions post-game, and even Micah Parsons just completely beside himself on the sidelines in disbelief of what was going on, is that they played one of their best games of the season. Mike McCarthy said it after the game was over in the press conference. He said, that's perhaps the first time that we've had a complete team effort. And on the defensive side of the ball, you held Joe Burrow and company to 20 points. And at times it was rough, but that's what you get when you're going up against Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow. You are going to get burned, right? The Bengals walked into this one as one of the top 5 scoring offenses in the NFL. And if you look at any advanced metrics, they've been one of the best offenses in the league. They have lost games because of their defense. You look at the offense, however, and no one is going to write any epics about Cooper Rush's game, but Rico Dowdle did his part. Rico Dowdle averaged over 7 yards per carry. And you had some distinct efforts throughout the game where you had CeeDee Lamb catching a screen pass to the right side of the offense and then finding a way to cut back and transverse the entire field on his way to the left side of the field to get a big gain. And you had those kind of moments. So even though it was limited on the offense side of things for obvious reasons, you had a solid game defensively, you had a solid game offensively, and it didn't matter because of a special teams mistake. And it was a rough mistake too. And that's the worst part of it all. It was that you were going to have that cherry on top of a good performance with that Nick Vigil block. At that moment, Nick Vigil gets his hands on the football. The game is over. That second, it is over, right? Because the ball is going to end up, let's say worst case scenario, it lands midfield and the Cowboys grab it at the 50-yard line. You could argue that's Brandon Aubrey range already. But the way that Rico Dowdle was running the ball, you were likely going to get a few extra yards, and you were going to be in a spot to where Brandon Aubrey was going to be asked to kick the game-winning field goal. And based on what we've seen this season, he would have gotten it. The thing is, and I will say this before we get into the DeMarvion Overshown injury thing, if Micah Parsons misses a sack and he costs the Cowboys the game because Joe Burrow shoots a touchdown pass 1 second later, you're pissed at Micah, but that's still Micah Parsons. If CeeDee Lamb drops a game-winning touchdown pass, you're pissed about it, but that's still CeeDee Lamb. But for Amani Oruwariye, to be the guy that costs you the game, I think that's got to stink for players across the entire roster, right? Now, I don't want to be mean to Amani because honestly, I do understand that's a tough spot to be in, right? Got a feel for the guy as well. John Fassel, the Cowboys special teams coordinator, described the sequence as a situation where Amani is not looking at the ball in that play, and he hears the roar of the crowd, but he doesn't realize the punt has been blocked. And here's what I take away from John Fassel's comments, which I think is important. It didn't happen out of greed. Because when I was watching that game, I was like, there's no way that you wanted to return that ball to keep the glory for yourself or something. That was my reaction watching the game, right? I was like, what the heck, Amani? Why would you be beat by your own greed to try to return the ball? I don't think that's what happened after listening to John Fassel speak to the media today. it's still a mistake. It's still a horrendous mistake. And I still think there is no way you can justify that, even with the roar of the crowd and all that. I agree it's a tough situation to be in, but I feel like you definitely have to be smarter than what happened on the field on Monday night. But at least we know it was not out of greed. I think you got to feel as a player a little bit worse, I would argue, when it happens with a player like that that's barely played really this season, that's been a backup, that has struggled defensively, and that was just activated off of IR. I think it might be a tougher pill to swallow, basically. But that's where the Cowboys are at, man. You could see it on everyone's faces. You could see it hear it in everyone's tones after the game when you watch those post game interviews. This team was devastated. And I think just the Marvin Overshown injury on top of it all just made it rough for players and coaches in the Cowboys sphere. Now, let's talk about the DeMarvion Overshown injury. If you've been busy with your workday, I'll catch you up very quickly here. DeMarvion Overshown suffered a turn MCL, PCL, and ACL. That's three turn ligaments that were hurt on DeMarvion Overshown's knee on Monday night. Obviously, his season is over, but the most concerning part of it is that his 2025 is in jeopardy, right? He might end up missing a few games on in 2025, but it's a strong possibility, or not a strong. I won't say strong. I will say real possibility, which is the words that Mike McCarthy used today, that he will miss the entire 2025 season. That could happen. We could talk about him missing the rest of 2024 and then 2025 on top of it all, which would be rough for obvious reasons, right? For obvious football reasons and just overall for the Marvin Overshown. That's a brutal, brutal injury to someone that has been so consistent in his work ethic. Even in 2023, you heard about how much Overshown was putting into his rehab. We got to 2024 and everyone was excited about Overshown, even though we didn't know anything about him. And I think that came from a place where Cowboys coaches and teammates, they knew, because they were watching Overshown practice and put in that work. And you listened to Eric Kendricks talk yesterday. He was devastated. He was heartbroken. He has seen a lot as a veteran in the NFL, and he was visibly shook for what had happened to DeMarvion Overshown. It's obviously a brutal injury. On a cold note, on a front office point of view, it makes linebacker one of your top needs going into 2025. And you already need tackles. You already need a defensive lineman. You already need depth at defensive end. Hell, you need a starter at defensive end if you allow DeMarcus Lawrence to walk in free agency. You need cornerback depth. You arguably need safeties as well. You need a running back. You need tight end depth. You need wide receivers. You need so many things. And one of those spots where you could have been comfortable with was linebacker after picking Murray's Leofau, after seeing Overshown's rise through the Cowboys ranks, after assuming the coaching staff remains the same, which we might have to talk about again this week with Troy Aikman's comments. If Mike Zimmer had returned, you could argue Eric Kendricks is easy to resign. You could have been comfortable at linebacker. And now it's one of your biggest needs on the team, because you cannot bet on Overshown being back by the start of the 2025 NFL season. Overshown will become a player that in 2026, if he's ready to go, he's got to be like that lost bill that you find in an old jacket that you have not worn in over a year, right? Oh, had a $10 bill right here. What can I buy, right? That has to be Overshown now for the Cowboys. If he can go in 2025, 2026, he's got to be that gift you were not expecting, basically. And you cannot plan anything around him right now, especially because it's the back-to-back season-ending injury in his knee, right? It's different knees, but still, that starts to become a little bit of a dangerous track record moving forward, because those knees are banged up already. Now, with all that being said, I will say there's a positive report out there about Overshown's knee injury. And it's difficult to frame it as something to be excited about because the whole situation just sucks. And as I said earlier, it's a nightmare of a situation. But according to Jordan Schultz from Fox Sports, there was no nerve damage on the DeMarvion Overshown's knee. There was no meniscus damage either. So he suffered injuries to all three ligaments, but the meniscus and the nerves were fine. That is huge for the long-term future of the DeMarvion Overshown. Because I think if there was nerve damage, you get into that career-threatening scenario with Overshown. Cowboys fans already went through all of that with Jalen Smith when the health was never really at 100%. And then there was like this very clear decline in athleticism from Jalen Smith. The fact there is no nerve damage should make rehab easier on the DeMarvion Overshown. And it isn't a crazy scenario to think, oh, he'll be back and he'll be back just fine. It will take a long time for us to get to that point. It might even be in 2026. And who knows what the contract situation will be by then with the entire team and obviously with Overshown as well. But you get into this spot where at least you can think someday we're going to celebrate Overshown being back on the field. And someday he should be the same player that he was, right? Maybe a little bit less upside for him. But if that rehab goes well, he might be the same because there was no nerve damage. So I think that's a big positive for the DeMarvion Overshown amid a thunderstorm of negatives. Again, I struggle to be like, oh, yay, he's going to be just fine because it is just a brutal piece of news that Cowboys fans got to witness last night. And you got to feel for him. You see players' reactions, coaches' reactions, and you just know how much they care about him. So it just overall, man, it just sucks straight up. Anyways, we've got some takeaways to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. Before we get out of here, I've got basically 4 takeaways for you because one of them was related to the DeMarvion Overshown. We already talked about that. What a game he had, by the way. What an absolute game he had. But let me know in the comments, man, what was your biggest takeaway from Monday's loss to the Bengals? While you let me know in the comments, let me talk to you about our friends over at Texas Card House, where the thrill of the game meets the excitement of the community. And if you're into playing poker, you know playing with the right community is always of the utmost importance. And at Texas Card House, you get the perfect blends of luxury, sophistication, and camaraderie for any poker aficionado. That is whether you're just starting out or maybe you're already a seasoned pro. You can go to Texas Card House and find the right community to play cards with. And keep in mind, if you go and you mention A to Z Sports, you will get a free month of membership and 2 free hours to play poker on top of that. So make sure you mention A to Z Sports and do it at the Las Colinas and Dallas venues. There are 6 Texas locations in total from Texas Card House. Check them out. Check them out at their website as well. And shout out to them. Now, back to the discussion. Let's talk about some takeaways here. My biggest one is far and away, oh boy, Rico Dowdle might really spoil whatever the front office is planning for this offseason. Because they might be thinking about drafting a running back. They might be thinking about making a big swing for a running back in the market, especially because I could envision the Jones family being like, have you seen what Barkley is doing with the Eagles? Have you seen what Henry is doing with the Ravens? Even J.K. Dobbins with the Chargers before his injury. We got to get us one of those backs. I could totally see that being a discussion at the start. And in comes Rico Dowdle, and he has a 131-yard performance, averaging 7.3 yards per carry, 5 of his 18 rushing attempts going for at least 10 yards, and gaining 87 yards after contact. That's got to make you think a little bit if you're the Cowboys. He is top 10 in success rate running the football. He's just been awesome, lights out. And I'm not saying you want him to be an every down back because of durability issues, but how are you not comfortable with Rico Dowdle being your lead back in 2025? I would be. And I don't think he will demand like a big payday either. It's going to be a decent payday, but he's not going to get the bag. He's not going to become one of the highest paid running backs or anything like that this season. So I'm just saying, man, when you look at Rico Dowdle, I think that's starting potential for years to come, not only 2024. But anyways, that was my number one takeaway from the game. And it was a positive in a game that ended up having so many negatives. Takeaway number two, and again, we already discussed this, but hey, last minute activation cost the Cowboys the game. It was pretty impressive to me that just in the game that Amani was activated off IR, ended up being that guy at the end of the game. Hurts for him. I don't want to pile on him. I really don't. But there's just no other way around it. That's a mistake from Amani. That's unjustifiable. I understand Fassel's explanation, but I still think you got to be aware of the situation and kind of like process that a little bit quicker, even if the crowd is roaring and all that. Overshown's injury is a massive blow. That was takeaway number 3 over at ADZsports.com, but we've gotten through that. Here's one. Tyler Guyton maybe should be worried about his future role on the team. Here's the thing about Tyler Guyton. I'm just not sure where he stands with the coaching staff. Think about it. He was already active once before Monday night and didn't start. And at the time, the explanation was, well, Tyler Guyton was not ready because he was not healthy. So we had a Sim Richards in his play. That happened a few weeks ago. Then there was a whole rotation thing with Richards once he was healthy. They were rotating him a lot, right? There was even the word competition thrown around press conferences when Mike McCarthy talked about left tackle. And now Guyton is active. He's ready to go. And Chuma Edoga is a starting left tackle for the Cowboys. Keep in mind, there was one point this season where McCarthy said that Edoga would have started week 1 at Cleveland had he been healthy and ready to go. And I'm just looking at how they're treating Tyler Guyton, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying they're asking Guyton to fight for his job and to really earn the snaps. And this is a year that is pretty much done playoff-wise. They're not making the playoffs. Everyone knows that. And still, Guyton is not getting those reps. And at some point, we got to wonder what's up with that, right? Think about that meme from the NBA Insider where he's like, why would they do that? Why would they do that? I'm intrigued by the whole Tyler Guyton situation. I got to go rewatch the Mike McCarthy press conference. I don't know if they asked him about it today on Tuesday, but they didn't on Monday. So wonder what's up with that. And then takeaway number 5, and I'll just give Joe Burrow his very deserved credit here. Micah Parsons was great, but Joe Burrow won that battle 100%. Micah had 10 pressures on Monday. That was a heck of an outing from Micah. And they made their choice, right? I understand people want Micah to move around. I also think, hey, Cowboys, they found a mismatch and they exploited it. And I'm talking about Micah basically being lined up against the Bengals rookie right tackle Amarius Memes. I understand wanting to move him around, but it was working. So why change it? And Micah had 10 pressures, and it was an awesome game to watch, but he didn't have any sacks. And I think the main reason why is just that Joe Burrow is so damn elusive, right? 10 pressures, no sacks. And a lot of those plays were just Joey either getting rid of the football very quickly or finding a way to escape through the B gap, the C gap, whatever, maybe rolling to his right to find an open receiver. And sure, there were some holdings here and there. By the way, that's 10 pressures on top of 2 holding calls that Micah provoked. And I would wanted to say, man, shout out Micah and shout out Joey V. Those two were going at it on Monday night, and that was a fun matchup to watch for sure, despite the end result being going against Dallas. And by the way, we could go for another 15 minutes and talk about the whole Micah Parsons thing at the end of the game and the response from fans and media to it. But long story short, let's just quit with the anti-Micah discussion. Let's just quit with doubting him as a winner and doubting how much he cares just because he hosts a damn podcast. Like, if you're questioning Micah's and how bought in he is at this stage, I just don't get it, man. I just don't. So shout out Micah Parsons. Went a little bit longer with this video, but there was so much to talk about. Hit the like button for me. I hope that you enjoyed the show, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.